Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, we're getting close to the end of this project, and today we're going to hook up the volume control, install the RCA jacks, do all the shielded wiring to the driver tubes, and then put this thing on my system and give it an audition and see what it sounds like. So I'm really excited. I think we're getting somewhere finally with this project. That this has been a long one. I know I've taken a lot of time, and I've been really careful because I'm using expensive parts, and this is a kind of a one-off chassis that I know I can't replace if I screw things up. And I really wanted this to be something special. So hopefully it's going to sound as good as it looks, but at the very least, very cool looking amplifier, I think, and would definitely be a conversation piece or just a very cool thing to have sitting around your house. So anyway, let's get to work. Okay, so today we're going to be working on installing the volume control and the RCA jacks so we can get ready to plug this thing in and see what it sounds like. We saw that it has enough input sensitivity, I believe, to run as an integrated amp. So we're going to put a volume control over here like this, and I measured over from this edge. I've learned putting it equidistant. It looks kind of weird. So you want to move it over so you've got a little more space here than you do on the top and the bottom. Again, this is just purely aesthetic decision. This is 2.5 inch high chassis. So we set this to 1.25 inches. Put a mark there. Double checked it going in this direction. At first I was going to put it over here, but I decided to move it over just a little more. I believe this is right at, let's see what this is. Yeah, 1 3/4. So it's a 1/2 inch further from the edge than it is from the top and bottom, which to me just, it looks nicer. And we've got a couple of different options on knobs. This is one that I'm considering. And then I have this other knob that has a little plate like this and has a little hex knob like that. And I'm almost thinking I'm going to go with this guy. I mean, I really think that's gonna fit the vintage kind of look of this amp, but that's easy enough to decide later. So we've got this nice audio note volume control. Parts Connection has these, and it's got a D-shaped, let me zoom in here so you can see what I'm talking about. It's got this D-shaped, or not even D-shaped, it's got flats on each side. One there and one there. And so we want to measure across these flats like this. We can see the measurement there. It's like it's 0.325. And then we find a drill bit that's that same size like that. And we're going to punch it out that size and then use a Dremel tool like this. And this bit seems to work well for this sort of thing, that kind of shape. And come back out and slot this hole out so that the volume control can't turn. Now make sure when you're slotting it, you look at the orientation that you want to have the pins, which I'm going to have them facing in this direction, so we want the slot to be vertical, and that keeps the volume pot from ever turning in the chassis. This is a little stare at center punch that I've been using, which I really like, and it's, of course you can get cheaper center punches, but this is a really nice one, and they're less than $15. And so kind of splurged on get me a super nice center punch. And just come over here and put our little mark there. Start off with our pilot bit, drill that hole. Then we come back after we double check the bit size. We come back with our main bit and drill that out like this. That. And then I'm going to go ahead and get off camera and use this to slot this hole out like this to get it to fit the volume knob. So I'll be right back after I do that, and we'll work on putting the RCA jacks into the side of the amp. Okay, so we got our hole here drilled out like we want. Let me zoom in here so you can see. And you can see it's like a oval shaped hole. Then I come in here with a round file and feel on the inside. And if you feel any rough edges, you just work on it a little more until you get it smooth. And there we go, we got it nice and smooth. And because the sides of this are steel, I'm going to come back with a little black paint, touch that up just so we don't have to worry about possibly rusting in the future. And then we want to, here's our volume knob. And then I found a couple of washers in my scrap bin. And then when I put it in here, put the nut on it, it'll stick through just the right amount. There we go. Nice and flush. And then put our knob on, it'll look like that. So, I think that'll look great. And again, we may end up going with this little guy here too. They may look cool too. I'll have to kind of stand back and look at it with both of them and decide which one I want to put on it. Anyway, that's future aesthetic stuff. Time to lay the amp down and drill the holes for the RCA jacks, and then wire the RCA jacks up to the volume control. Well, actually, they're going to go on this side. So they'll be right here, and then have a short run up to the volume control, and then a short run over here to the driver tubes. And so try to keep the signal path as short as possible on the input side to avoid picking up any kind of hum or noise from the transformers or the AC part of the amp. So let's go ahead and lay the amp down, and we'll mark those holes off and get ready to drill them. So here are the jacks I'm going to be using, and I've showed you these before. I really like these. These are super high quality. The ground solders onto the side. We're going to get a file and knock this plating off so we're down to the brass so the solder sticks really good. And then obviously the positive goes on the center. They have these really nice looking nuts that go on them. And then they come with these two insulating washers. If you look at this one, see if I can get this where y'all can see it really well. You can see the step on it. You want to get your measuring tool. You want to measure across that part right there for the hole you want to drill, so that the step is what the size of the hole is. And so we've measured that. We've got this drill bit right here, right size. The next thing we want to figure out is where to put them. And earlier I measured where the amp sits on my shelf and where my preamp is. And for my use, the first hole, or the first jack, will be 100 millimeters or 10 centimeters from the front edge. And then I normally put these about 15 millimeters up, and we'll do our first punch mark there. And then looks like 20 millimeters apart works well. So I'm going to put a little mark there, 20 millimeters over, and then go back to my 15 millimeter from this edge, mark that, and mark our second hole right there. And there are 2 holes marked. I'm going to go off camera for a minute. I don't think you need to watch me drilling these holes. I'll spin the amp around, drill these 2 holes for my RCA jacks, and then clean them up with a file. And like I said, I'm going to get some touch-up paint, a little tester's paint, and touch up the edges of these holes I just drilled. Then we'll get busy on wiring these sockets and the volume control up to the amp. And we'll be ready to hook this thing up to my system and see what it sounds like. Okay, first thing you want to do when you're wiring up a volume control is make sure that you're wiring it up correctly and not backwards. You want it to have low ohms between the center terminal and one of the outside terminals when it's turned all the way counterclockwise, and then as you turn it clockwise, the ohms should increase. And that's telling you this terminal on this side is our ground, and we're going to have the signal coming in over here. The center terminal goes to the grid of the input or driver tube. And what will happen is, as you turn it counterclockwise, it grounds the grid and the signal is at high resistance so that the grid's not getting any of the signal. And then as you turn it in this direction, more of the signal comes through and less of it is going to ground. And as you see, if we move this over to this side over here, what will happen is, as we turn the volume up, it becomes closer to being a direct connection from the input signal to the grid of the tube, and then we have 100K of resistance between the input signal and the ground, and that'll be the input impedance of the amplifier. So we're going to wire this up in that direction, and I also want to show you, this is the type wire I use for my signal wire, and as you can see, we use the white will be the ground, the red will be our signal, and this is the shield. We're only going to connect the shield at the driver tube end of this wire, and the other end will be open. So we don't want the shield connected on both ends. We only want it connected on the amp side, or closest to the driver tube side is where we're going to hook the shield up to. So when we get into wiring all this, I'm going to do this off camera. I'm sorry guys, this is just so detailed. Trying to do this on camera is a nightmare. But I will show you exactly how I wire this up when I get all this stuff soldered into place. So let me get this stuff connected to the volume control and the RCA jack, and I'll go into detail of showing you exactly how this stuff is wired up. Okay, I want to show you how I've been wiring up the volume controls using shielded cable on my latest projects. And this is a little different than I had shown you previously. This is I guess we've kind of moved to the next, you may say, level of shielding, or how I wire these things up. And I'll explain what I've done here and why. Okay, this is the end that connects to the amplifier on the grid and the ground of the input tubes. And zoom in here, you can see that I've tied the negative signal lead to the shield, and this connects to the ground bus at the input tubes that goes to the star ground point of the amplifier. And this is our signal positive that comes from the input source through the volume control. So then next, here's what the wiring looks like at the volume control. And this wire here is the wire that goes over to the grid and the star ground. And you can see the shield here is connected from the shield of this wire to the shield of this wire. And then we have the two grounds connected here to this point. The grid of the input tube is connected to the center or the wiper of the volume control, and this is the hot from the input signal connected to this end of the pot. And then finally, we hook the two wires up here, and as you can see, the shield is not connected to anything. It's just left open. And then we have the ground connected to the body of the RCA jack, and then the signals connected to the center pin. And the reason I started doing it like this and connecting these two shields together, I think in the past I had tied or left this open and then tied this to this ground point, and I started thinking about it. If we pick up noise in this wire, this shield going over to the jack, we don't want it going into this pin. We want it going all the way to the star ground point. So this way, we've basically just pulled these wires out of the shield, and the shield is continuous all the way from this point at the input jack. And like I said, it's not connected to the input jack because we don't want to create a ground loop, all the way over to this point where it goes to the star ground point in the amp. So, you know, it basically looks like this. And so I'm going to go ahead, and I bent these over just to give me some room here to work on these leads. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other wire and hook up the other jack, and then we'll be ready to wire this thing up to the amplifier. But just want to show you all a little detail about how I'm now doing this, connecting these two shields together. And I feel like this is probably the best way to run shielded cable inside an amplifier to keep it from picking up any noise inside the amp. So let me get this wired up, and I'll come back and show you when we're ready to wire this thing up into the amplifier and where we're hooking it up to the tag strip. Okay, here we got it installed. Here's the audio note volume pot with the leads coming over here to my tag strip, and I'll get a close-up of that in just a second. And then we see these two leads coming off the volume pot over here to the RCA jacks that are on the side. And I got these hanging down, but they tuck up like that, out of sight up in this little upper corner. So they're further shielded from picking up any noise. So, and I made sure that these go up and around with the heaters. The AC's over here. So we got the signal wires way away from any possible noise it could be picking up. So let me flip the ramp around and show you how I hooked it up to the tag strip. And then we brought these over here. This is the ground lug, that's the ground bus for this tag strip. Again, it's got a jumper wire that comes over here to this terminal, which is the other ground hooks up here. And then this is our main ground that goes over to our star ground point. So both the shield and the negative signal for the input is right here at going to the star ground point. Then this is our input signal to the grid, which is this resistor right here. And then same thing here. This is the grid and the resistor over here to this tube. So nice short signal path, and like I said, these are up out of the way where they're not near any signal to pick up any noise. So now we're ready to hook this thing up to some speakers and my phono stage and see what this thing sounds like. So I think we're going to wrap up this part of the video here. I'm going to go listen to it and then do a final wrap up of the video with some listening impressions without any feedback applied. Well, we're back, and of course Dolly's here with us again, and she's saying hi. If you miss her, she's been missing you guys. Anyway, we cooked this thing up to my system, pair of RP600Ms, got a EAR 834 tube preamp that I've shown on this channel with my Techniques turntable. Listened to some Hugo Kant, one of my favorite albums, which I featured on one of my Monday monologues before. Elton John, Madman Across the Water. Some, Michael Jackson, some other, albums that I really know what they sound like. And, went from heavy bass to, detailed treble, and really wanted to get a feel for what this amp sounds like. And I'm astonished. I mean, it looked good on the audio analyzer too, and the scope pattern looked good. Didn't show a lot of power. I was a little concerned about that. This thing hooked up to an active load, it sounds great. And honestly, for my use, with fairly near field listening to not even super efficient speakers, this thing's got enough power. And it sounds good all the way up to wide open on the volume control. Unlike my 6BM8 amp that starts getting pretty distorted when you get past, 3/4 or so volume, this thing sounds good all the way up to wide open. And I have a feeling that could get some more juice out of it driving it with a preamp. But I'm just, again, given this thing has over 90-year-old tubes in it, it's mind-blowing how good this thing sounds. It definitely, I feel like, sounds better than my 6SQ7 amp, and it's right there with how clean my 300B amp sounds. I mean, it sounds that good. And possibly some of that is due to these Hashimoto output transformers and all the super high quality parts we've used in it to make sure that these tubes had every chance to sound great. Now, did run into some weird issues with, again, being these ancient tubes. When I first powered it up, the volume control was crunchy sounding, like it was a bad volume control. Like when you turn it up, you go, and I'm like, crap, it's a brand new Audio Note volume control. What's going on? So I decided to swap the tubes from one channel to the other, and the crunchy noise followed the tubes. It's like, I've never seen that before. So swapped in another 27 tube, and it went away. So I do want to end up with 4 RCA tubes. So I've got another Radiotron 27 mesh plate tube on the way. And this will be, I think, the 5th 27 that I've bought. Luckily, these things are cheap. They're, $15, $20, $30 at the most. So these aren't super expensive tubes. I mean, some of y'all might say, oh, wow, you've thrown away that much money. But, I don't even want to know how much money I've got in this amp at this point. Anyway, once that other tube gets here, some final details that I want to do is I'm going to hook up a substitution box and play with some shade feedback. Probably going to go no lower than 470K. I don't want to put much in it because it sounds so good. It's a little bright, which I was kind of expecting from looking at what I saw in the audio analyzer suite. So I know that a little bit of shade feedback will kind of take the edge off the high end. It should bring up the low end a little bit, and probably will get rid of some distortion. But I want to be careful that I don't kill much of the power output, because it's, it's there, but it's marginal. And I'm shocked that a ultralinear pentode tube with 0 feedback sounds this good. Normally they sound crappy when they don't have any feedback and they're super distorted. That's just not the case. And I don't know whether it's because it's got, it's a direct heated tube, and or why, or if it's just something about this tube complement, whether the 27s are canceling the distortion of the 47s, vice versa. I don't know, but it sounds great. And I'm sure with just a little bit of tweaking, it's going to be just over the top. So I'm thrilled with the way this amp turned out. And I don't want to release the schematic until I get this last little bit of tuning done. And I am going to play with the resistor on the ultralinear tap just a little bit. It's got, I think, a 1.2K in it right now. I might pull that down to, 800 ohms or 470, get the voltage up on the screen a little bit and see what that does. And I hate to mess with it too much. It sounds so good. And I really feel like, I don't know if it's because it's on an active load, it sounds a lot larger than you would think out of a 1 watt amp tested on a scope with a 1K signal. The other thing that I want to do, even though it's not necessary because these are cathode biased tubes, this meter looks so cool that I've just got to put this on here. And there's this kind of blank spot right here on the amp, and I want to put it right there. And I was trying to decide whether just to put the faceplate and then countersink the meter underneath, but I thought sitting down low it would kind of look weird and have just this little thin plate. So I'm going to surface mount this, and then I got to figure out what kind of switch I want to use to switch back and forth between the two tubes. On my other amps I've used the little micro switches, but obviously back then they wouldn't have anything like that. So I'm thinking some kind of a round, full-size toggle switch right here will look good, and I can like move this over, in front of this tube, and then have the switch right here, and it'll kind of just fill out this area of the amp and look really nice. These 10-turn hum pots are the bomb. I've used like single turn ones on my 300B, and it's really hard to kind of, get right in the middle. But on this, I'm running AC heaters on everything. There is no hum. I mean, none. And you can, half a turn each way on this hum pot, you can hear some hum coming in, going away, and coming in. You can really zero in on the center. If it was a 1-turn pot, it would be so sensitive you'd never find it. So these are really awesome. They turned out great. And I'm glad I went with AC heaters. It simplified everything. Again, I'm stoked with how great this turned out. I was skeptical. I've never seen anybody else building, modern hi-fi gear using these almost 100-year-old style of tubes. And it exceeded my expectations, I'll put it that way. This could end up being one of my best sounding amps. So again, let me get some tuning done the last little bit. I'll be publishing a schematic, I'll be publishing a BOM, I'll put all that on my website. And then if you're interested, build one of these for yourself. I think you'll really enjoy both the process, having something this unique in your collection, and it's just something you can say, hey, listen to this. Here's some almost 100-year-old technology, and blow people's minds with how good it sounds. But anyway, really hope you're enjoying this series. I've really enjoyed this project. I think this is super unique, and probably not going to ever see another one like this built, at least on YouTube. So again, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe, please like the video, and we'll see you soon as we finish up this amp. Have a great day.